Tak já mluvím česky, ale v těch terminologii a tak nejsem jako dobrý. A ještě prostě mám rád, to dělám v angličtině spíš. Takže začneme anglicky. So first of all, if you already know a bit of JavaScript, or you want to improve your knowledge, and maybe just to visit Kiwi offices in Brno, we will have this JavaScript weekend that will take place this January. So everybody is welcome. You just need to go to this link and do some small test exercise and basically apply. I work at KiwiCom, and today we will talk about GraphQL and how it is related to REST APIs and Redux. So first of all, please raise your hand who at least tried GraphQL. Nice, this is really cool. I didn't expect so many hands. So it means that at least those of you who raised your hands probably worked with Redux before, or even maybe continue to work, right? Raise your hands, please, who work with Redux or worked. Nice, thank you. And I also worked with Redux before. And basically, as you remember, you just, in your action creators, you arrange the asynchronous communication with the server, the REST API, and you actually write a lot of boilerplate code, and it can get messy if you allow it to get messy. So, but before that, sorry, I want to tell, my name is, I always write it like this, basically. Because on my card and in the list, for some reason, organizers put this version, but I do not really like it. This is how I am in my pass. But you can also find me on Twitter, on GitHub, many social networks as Aliaksei Aliakseyeu. And it will be really cool if you maybe tweet something from this presentation, because I like it. That's it. And first of all, I want to criticize the REST API a bit. We front-end guys, we always work with REST APIs, and most of the time, they're not so good as we want them to be, because backend guys, sometimes really do not care about how the app will look, and maybe they just have some task just to create a REST API from the data they have. And communication with front-end developers sometimes becomes really painful, and because we think in UI mostly, and we do not want to manage the data that we get from REST API. We do not want to make joins in our business logic and do all the processing. We just want to get the data in the shape we want and just to put it in UI. This would be perfect, right? So, as you understand, REST API is not really flexible. You get an endpoint, and you understand that you need some more data in that endpoint, and then you need to write your backend guy, please create another endpoint without these fields or with some additional fields, and you need to wait for it to be implemented. If endpoint gives you more data that you want, but you need to use it right away, then you will end up with overfetching. You will fetch more data that you want. And if you do not have enough data, then it is called underfetching. So these are the problems that you can find using REST APIs. Also, most of the time, there are round trips. Imagine, for example, you want to fetch a list of users and then like also fetch their friends. So first to fetch a list of users, and then for each user you will fetch his friends, because in REST API it's like very often it's structured through URLs, right? And also, if you want to version your REST API, it is more like backend question, but anyway, like it is not so easy to do. And deprecations are not easy to make too. So what about Redux? First, we will actually like talk about these two technologies, right? And then I will tell you why GraphQL can help with these drawbacks, right? So Redux is imperative, so you need to write manually all the steps of how you process the data that you get from REST endpoints, and basically create action for notifying UI that you started fetching, then action to actually modify the data, action to like notify UI that fetching is complete, then it goes to reducer, and blah, blah, blah. So all the steps you need to write manually, right? And again, the question, why we front-end developers need to like manipulate the data so much as we do nowadays, right? So we want it to be as less painful as possible. And this boilerplate code, all these actions, reducer things, like all middlewares, asynchronous manipulation, it can get messy, especially if we invite some juniors in our team and we do not do like reviews properly. So it is very easy to get weird. And Redux is mostly about data management. So if we remove that part of data management that Redux does, we basically end up with UI like state management. And nowadays it can be managed easily using like React tools itself, like local state, context, etc. So here comes GraphQL. It's not a silver bullet, I'll tell you like in advance. It has some cons, and I will tell you which ones. And basically, GraphQL is not some tool, it's not something that's some code, you know, but it is mostly like query language that was invented at Facebook by Lee Byron, you know probably that guy. And also like GraphQL, it also like includes runtime in which your GraphQL queries are processed. It is used by many companies, so it was like hype before, it's like wasn't mainstream, but now like more and more companies like New York Times and like many big name companies start to use this. And as you see, like GitHub has GraphQL endpoints exposed already, so you can try to use it, and I'll show you actually that. So, but why GraphQL? What it like gives you? Why it is cool? Why it is like becomes mature, and you do not need to be like, you know, you actually need to try it, because if you don't do it now, then you will not catch up with the new technologies later. I think so. So basically, if I would try, if I would explain it to you like in few words, it helps front-end developers separate the data management from the client, from the front end. So GraphQL lives as a layer between front end and back end sources. Like it can be like databases, it can be REST APIs, it can be like everything. But GraphQL helps aggregate all these endpoints, and before it gives data to front end, this data management can happen there. So basically imagine that Redux data management part would be put like in a separate layer, and actually it's much easier to do than in Redux, to to manage the data that you get from the data sources. Yeah, as I told you, it separates the data management from front end, but at the same time, front end now can dictate how these data responses should look. And as I told you, yeah, it can aggregate the many data sources and then expose one endpoint to front end. And front end will just tell, I need this field, and inside that I need those fields, and I need to put it in this component, and it will work. REST APIs, as I told you, they are still there, but they are abstracted by this GraphQL layer. And REST API is just one of types of data sources you can use. You can put GraphQL directly on a database or few databases, and then aggregate that data and put it in one form that user wants, client wants. And most of the time, if you open the page of the app that communicates with GraphQL, then most of the time that page will send only one request to get all the data, like most of the time. Like you don't want to do it if, for example, you have some really expensive component to render, like that wants to have really much data, and it is better like to fetch the data for it like after you fetch the main data that like essential data that we want to show, like defer the request. And one of big pluses of GraphQL is it's like strongly typed. Like in the REST APIs, most of the time, like it's not so like how to say it. It's not easy like to understand the typing that REST API provides. But in a GraphQL type system, the schema is the king. So from the schema goes everything. And because of that, GraphQL API is always typed, and you can like easily understand what you can get, what data you can get from it, and what like queries you need to send to get the data. And you don't need to do versioning of the API because, like again, like it based on the schema. And if you need to remove a field or add a field, like new field will not anyhow like influence all other fields that you want to like return in your responses. But GraphQL has its cons. I didn't want to put it here, but anyway, like not be so like opinionated, because I love GraphQL, but it has cons, right? So it doesn't have like support of like native caching support in browsers like REST API does. But anyway, like caching is done like inside GraphQL code and also in client libraries. Caching is also supported. Only that you do not have this like automatic caching support as REST provides. Also, like if you want to monitor like GraphQL queries that you send to the GraphQL server, then you'll need like more time like to set up it. And errors are not handled really well because again, GraphQL provides only one endpoint to you, to front end, and it's always like returns 200 OK. And error information can be sent inside the response itself as one of fields. But you will need like to provide this error info to somehow set up it on GraphQL server. Also, like schema is exposed. Like if you know the endpoint, you can easily see like all the information about like how the responses are structured, etc. So basically, if you work with GraphQL, you do not need to use any Swagger tool or something like to show the structure of the data of responses and payloads. You just use that URL and special tool, and then you have all the information like without any other steps. Also, there is no like common solution for authentication and authorization in GraphQL community. So, and basically most of the time it is put in the business logic. So this can be like an additional like step to do. And as I told you, like it's not silver bullet, but you need to try it, right? Because front-end guys, like with which I work, we really love it. And we can manage it ourselves. We do not need help from backend people. Even in cases, if we receive bad REST API, sometimes it happens, the REST API that we do not really like, we just abstract it in our GraphQL small server, and we actually shape it in the form that we want to receive on front end, like without managing it in front end business logic. So, do we need Redux after we introduce GraphQL? As understood, like there is no need for data state management anymore because it's like handled on GraphQL side. And to me, it was like a bit of surprise that after I started like to use GraphQL, I didn't I was surprised that I didn't install like Redux in the end in my app. And then I started to analyze why it happened. And actually, yeah, Redux, most of the time you deal with those asynchronous requests and management data. So, yeah. So only UI state is left. And currently, like, as I told you, like before, React gives you context that you can easily use for that. Like, I'm happy with context. But Redux, yeah, here it's like Redux is not so useful as without GraphQL. And you can also use special tools that allow you to manage the state, but they are more declarative, like a polylink state. It's like part of a library that you can use on front end to receive data from GraphQL. And there are some cases when Redux can be useful still when you use GraphQL. For example, sometimes you need to rehydrate your data. I mean, like to make your app persistive, like in data when you refresh the page. If I like told it right, I'm not sure. Like it's called rehydration. And also, you can have like even like some really complex state management, like really complex state in your app, like in front end that you cannot like manage with normal React forces. And maybe you know some edge cases that still require Redux to handle them. But in our like latest projects, we did not install like Redux yet, at least, and no MobX or anything else. Most of the time, it is solved even by a local state. What clients you can use, what libraries you can use actually to communicate with GraphQL server? Sometimes you do not need like any special library. You can just fetch. So, and here, as you may see, if you see, of course, like, okay. So this is like just a normal synchronous function here that receives the query, like the payload for the GraphQL query. And it just runs the fetch function or like and fetches data from that one endpoint that you are provided from GraphQL. In this case, like is GraphQL, and we like put the parameter doc and our query in the request URL. And then we just normally process the response, etc. But if you want like to have some more declarative approach, if you want to have like caching already like provided to you and all other like comfortable stuff, then you need to choose between these two libraries. There is like new one in the house. It's called GraphQL React, I think. Yeah, and it's a very like simple library. These ones are more functional, I would say. And Apollo, if you, for example, try to compare these libraries to some JavaScript frameworks, then imagine then Relay Modern, I would compare it to Angular in a way that it gives you quite a lot that is really opinionated. But Apollo I will compare to React because like you can adjust internals and like use some different caching mechanisms, like import new libraries and use it with it. So it's more flexible, I would say, and less opinionated than Relay Modern. But in Kiwi.com we use Relay Modern most of the time because we started with that. And currently we have some discussions about introducing Apollo to some of our new projects. Let's see how it's actually resolves. So what I wanted you to know is just imagine like some simple React component, and imagine that right inside that you can actually declare what fields, like what object you want to receive to render the data in your component. In GraphQL, using those libraries that I previously showed, you can actually declaratively describe what data you want. So it is named collocation, like when your data requirements are collocated with component code. As I already told you, because of that, because your component tells exactly which fields it wants, then it will get those fields. Even though like server does not provide some field, it will get null at least. It will not like the responses will not be broken like if some field is not there, and there is no like will not be overfetching and underfetching. And fields in GraphQL can be like easily deprecated, like by introducing, for example, new field, and the previous field like that needs to be deprecated will just have the message that this is deprecated when you use it. You will see it in response. And I'll show you like a bit of syntax, like the request shape, the payload that you give with that endpoint that you get from the GraphQL looks like JSON without values, right? So is a very easy example that it looks like an object without values, JSON without values, right? And then you receive the response with the data in this exact shape. There is a tool that allows you like to see, to like play with the GraphQL endpoint even before like fetching data from it on client. It's called like graphical, and there's some animation, blah blah. I think it's like not really readable. It's not readable at all. Okay. So anyway, I'll try. Yeah. Try that just to show you that on the left side, it is like the query that you can put inside that window, like similar to what I showed you like on the previous slides. And in the middle, it's like the response that you get. And in this tool, like to use it, you need just provided the endpoint. That's it. And on the right side, there is information about all the instances, like everything you can get, all the queries you can send, and you can even see like what responsive you can get from there. Okay, so I showed you this, right? But if we want to introduce some more fields to render in our component, like salary, like some parameters of this guy, yeah, and we want actually to divide this query into parts, into fragments of the query. So you see that I put this height and weight information of body of me, like in a fragment, and then I can just reference it like this in the query. And you can put these fragments into children components, and then reference them in parent component that has this main query, and it will work. So you have, for example, salary component, you have body component, and in the end, you can even like put everything in one place, right? So it's very like manageable. Here, it is more readable, right? So on top left, it is like the main query that we send. The viewer is the main like field that includes everything. And fragment you see is like, I call it info. On user, user is a type in which this data is located. And then I receive the data in one object, which can be easily like used in props and rendered without any manipulation. Also, you can give some params. Like in this case, I give the parameter to the query, the login parameter. And it works like this. And also, you can use variables. You just have a separate small window for putting variables in JSON format, and then you can reference them in the query. You can go like to GraphQL or .org for more syntax. Server. Again, very easy to implement. I recommend to try Apollo server because like it's very nicely documented. And also, if you don't want to bother at all, like, and you want to just create some database and then API from the database, like automatically, try Prisma. Very nice. And we still have like 7 minutes or 5 minutes, something. I'll try like to show you the short amount of code. Oh, sorry. It was too early. Not too early, but anyway. Now you know why I came here, right? So, guys, I created just simple GraphQL server and simple like client. This is just create React app with some components. On the server, I have in my package JSON. I'll make it a bit more visible. It's maximum probably, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, here I installed only Apollo server package and GraphQL package. You'll see in index.js how I use them. So I will close this one. Import two commands from Apollo server. It's Apollo server itself, like instance that you can create, and GraphQL function to actually describe types. And here you see that I mock the data for now. It's like the list of technologies and like name of technology and who created that. I'm not sure about REST API because I'm sure about REST, but not about RESTful principles. And so, as I told you, GraphQL is like schema-centric. So these types can remind me of some flow types or TypeScript types. And you see that I use this GraphQL JQL function, like to describe them. In tech type, I describe every like technology type, and query type is the main type for all that has all the queries, all the top level queries that you can call. And you see that it returns an array of technologies. Very easy. And now there are like functions that are called resolvers in which you describe, okay, I have this query, this that is actually should correspond to the queries that you list in the type, query type. And how do I get the technologies? Okay, I just return this array, right, that I mocked. And finally, we create an instance of Apollo server that requires just to know the type definitions and how you resolve data for those types. Then I just run the server. I think I already have it. Okay. Oh, okay. The thing is that just I was like surprised that my keyboard didn't work like because when it was like in full screen. Fuck Apple, right? Okay, so let's run the server. Here I go to. Oh, what was my hands? I go to the server, and what do I do? I do node index.js. Yeah, it's already in use somewhere here. Yeah. So anyway, if you go here, you have this tool that I showed you on screenshots, but it's more like fancy. And here you see that I just put the endpoint on which my server runs. And here I can write the queries because I can name it as I want, just some name that I put here. But all technologies is the query you remember I put into in here. Okay, I have 2 minutes. So it is here. It returns an array of tag and resolves from just mock data, right? With the same structure that I need, title, author, right? So, and I have this all technologies, that the queries that this is exposed, and I run it, and I get this data. For you like to see that it really works, I'll just copy it, because, yeah, so it's really fast. And now I'll show you really fast how I use this server in the application. So this is basic React Create app. And what I changed here is that in index.js, I imported this Apollo client because I use Apollo library and Apollo provider. Basically, Apollo client helps you like create instance of the client that will requires to know only the URL. Also, you can provide here the non-standard approach for caching, for example. So, and you use this instance of Apollo client, and you just provide it with Apollo provider to the whole app. You see that I imported Apollo provider here for React Apollo because we need some library that actually can make Apollo communicate with React, because Apollo can be used not only with React but many other libraries. So it's very easy, and in tech component, I import React normally, and I import this query component from React Apollo again, and JQL function actually to describe my query. And you see that I use that query components and give as a prop the query to it. And it will, when I render the components, this query components will communicate with that instance of Apollo client. And it will send this query. And as a result, okay, my time is going to 0. As a result, you get the data prop with with the response. It will look basically like this. So this will be the prop that we will receive. And it has inside all technologies, and I just normally map it. The key I would not use like title, I would use some ID, but anyway. And you basically wrap this logic into the query component, and because of that, you can receive the loading prop if you have the loading is loading and still in process, you can get some error if the response provided, and you can get the data even like, and this data will also like have the error inside if some props if some fields failed to be delivered. But what is good with GraphQL, again, like if some fields failed to be resolved, you will get at least something. And with that error exactly for those non-resolved fields. Let's try it. Okay. Come on. Client. Yarn start. Oh. Yeah. It's here. So we get exactly the same data, and if we look and if you try to inspect and see the network, I think that this is this one. This is the request, and what? No, it's not that. I suppose this one's. Yeah, cool. So you see that we use that endpoint. Our server runs now on localhost, and the GraphQL is the only one endpoint is provided. We can send only post request to that, and it will depend on the payload here. If we want to modify something, or we just want to fetch data, etc. And here there's some null for operation name because I didn't declare the name for it. But you see the query here. You see that we didn't provide any variables, and the response is the same as we got in that tool. So what you want to get, you get, and you do not need to manage it on front end. So everything is all the manipulation with the data is resolved on the GraphQL server in those resolver functions. For example, yeah, I need to finish right now. Sorry. The server, here I mocked the data, right? But I could, here in the resolver, not to just take the data, but send the request to some REST endpoint, send the request to database, and then like somehow modify this data here and put it in the shape that I want to see on front end. So this is everything I wanted to show you, only this last slide. If you want like to play with these technologies and even like to do some serious things with them, then try to apply to kiwi.com. The main office is in Brno. Also opened an office 1.5 years ago in Prague, and we have an office in Barcelona. So join us. And if you want to contact me, here is my nickname in social networks, and this is my email. Yeah. So thank you guys for your attention. One point is that I don't know if we have time for questions. Probably not. Yeah, one question. Anybody? Here?
Jedna. Dobre.
Is there any effort to address the issues that you stated about GraphQL, like, I don't know, the caching and so on? Are there some projects that are addressing that?
Yeah, as I told you, caching is handled in the server business logic most of the time. And there are some special libraries. One is provided by Facebook, it's called Data Loader. One is provided by Apollo team, it's called Data Sources, and they like handle the caching inside. Also, like error handling and monitoring gets better. So all those cons that I named, they are with time they are improving, and actually, this is good time like to contribute to community, right?
Máte ještě někdo jeden dotaz, rychlej nějaký? OK. Moc krát děkuju.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.